Good morning. It's another beautiful day. My room's a sauna, and I'm inside with the blinds closed. Well, that means it's time for another episode of Road to Wreck. As we come out of Maiden, I notice someone at the bank, Kate, who is currently trialing insanity. In her application, she posted pictures of her amazing puppy, and so I just had to ask for some puppy pics. During the next Maiden, I get a PM, puppy pics incoming. And just look at this cutie. Oh, he's so... Yeah, I cut out the rest of that, don't worry about it. Alright, so next up is a failed skip, a dead melee DPS, and Alex casually scything a blood spawn.
What?
What can you do? About an hour later, after a bunch of maidens, 2 bloats, and a Nylo, we get another good maiden. The specs don't look too good at first, but we get it to 0 without the ranger backup. This means we still got his ZCB spec for the 50s push, so we're probably fine. The 70s proc is relatively deep, everybody is still on tick, and because we have that ZCB spec, we can pretty much guarantee the 50s proc when we want it. During the stack, my bow goes mask off, and we easily push it to 44%. All of the crabs are caught, and the dihns destroys the pile. Chins do well, we keep going mask off, and get a really nice skip. The skip was good because the dihns and chins were good, which prevents residual 50s leak. We also bow on 32%, and I basically max hit with that 420 XP drop. Deep 70s, clean stack, deep 50s, big chins and dihns, and no leak. That's the recipe for a 112. Well, it was a 113. Sometimes the mages kill it, who are on a different tick than the melee and the ranger, so 113, but we take those. Next up is Bloat, and since I don't P-neck, I really don't have much to show here. I actually forget to give Tuki the runes for spellbook swap so that he can throw. And I kinda scramble to get the runes out of my pouch. We manage to trade before Bloat stops, and in the meantime Bloat's getting chunked down. At this point I hover over the barrier, and I'm just laser focused on Bloat's yellow lights. When he stops, the lights flash and then completely turn off. We go in there, and at this point it's really up to RNG if we get it or not. I always think it's nice to claw kinda late, because he regens defense and claws are very accurate. Clawing late lets me scythe on lower defense for longer, which is probably very minimal, but there's not a lot more we can do anyway. We get the 1 down and a sub 2 into Nylo again. Take those. Yeah, I would show you the waves, but I plan to do a more detailed analysis kind of video on Nylo waves in the future. And because there is just so much to say, I prefer to skip over it now and just show you the boss. This boss is kinda wild. I insta-zeroed it with a 75 DPS BGS spec, and we get the instant range phase. Because our waves were good, not everybody had regen spec yet for their ZCB in the first range phase. This can be kind of bad when it goes melee into mage, because then the boss will be so low already that the ruby bolts might not do full damage anymore. Fortunately, it goes melee into range into another melee phase. That's a god boss. No mage phase bosses are pretty rare. If you do the calcs on it, in 5s you always kill it on that last melee phase, so we basically got melee guaranteed, range, melee, range, melee. That's a 1 in 16 chance. Since mage is so low DPS, that is exactly what we want, and if you look at the chat box you can probably see why. Oh yeah, that is pace, and let's see where it takes us. Well, it takes us to Sot, of course, and we instantly get 2 hammers, everybody venges, and we get teleported for the maze. The maze goes well it seems, and so far so good, but I have to spoil it because otherwise you'll miss it. But in the bottom left of the screen, Tuki dies to a melee attack. After this clip, I'm going on a little rant to explain exactly what happened. If we play it back a little, he was very high health when the maze started because he didn't get any orbs during P1. Then, he was chosen to run the maze and still high health. When he came out of the maze, he used the group heal spell which heals the team and usually helps the mazer proc a P-neck. But, because he was so high health, the spell brought him to just over 20 HP and he didn't proc a neck. Then, on low health, he has a hammer spec, which, along with the group heal stall and him not stepping back immediately, put him on the melee tick. If he did step back right away, his next scythe would have been on the melee tick, so he would have had to then lose a tick in order not to get meleeed. So much for that 525 entry though, but that's just the way it goes. Unfortunate, go next. Well, when you go next, you go back to Maiden, so here we are.
Fucking misclicked, right?
Goofy, better known as Horse Lord, or just Horse, is freezing north, and he's usually really good. But we all do a little trolling now and then.
What
Bro,
can you do?
fucking Bloat, dude.
But please tell me,
Whoa.
how am I meant to chin this? Okay, the next person to troll a little is Tuki. We always trade the same runes at the start of Maiden, and after he trades me, he venges his teammate and cancels the trade. We then trade again, and he doesn't have space. We then trade again, and he cancels. Tuki, we want to try again?
Struggle.
Holy!
Yeah.
And then, finally, on the fourth raid, we did it. At least he gave me death runes this time. The next Maiden clip is from another run, and we had like no specs. The Ranger has to back up, which I explained earlier is bad for our 50s push, because he won't have a ZCB spec to guarantee the proc. At least she's almost zero defense now, but we'll have to rely on the melee's claws, kind of like back in the day when there wasn't a ZCB. Maidens back then were a lot less consistent, mostly due to the 50s proc, and of course the ZCB just does more damage. We get the good 50s proc, and the Ranger death charges and kills S1. Because he only BGS'd once and saved 50% spec, he gained enough spec from the death charge to ZCB for the 30s push. This is usually great to reduce 50s leak into the skip, but it's not our main strategy because the 50s push is usually more important. There is another method to get a second ZCB spec so that we can spec for both the 50s and the 30s, but that method relies on spellbook swap freezing south, which is also generally inconsistent, and we deem it not worth running for at the moment. What's interesting about this Maiden is that even when we have to fall back to plan B, it's still possible to get good times. Obviously, there was good damage RNG involved, because otherwise this would have been completely lost, but I'm not complaining. Last but not least, I can show another run. I hope you guys don't get tired of me narrating Maidens, but to me there's just so much to point out that I'm probably going to keep doing it regardless. We basically insta-zero her. She has 9 defense left and I decide to save spec. We run back and it's already deep. We both hit big on 78, but we greet another bow. I max a bow on 70.5% and we proc her to 64%. We have to take bloats out of our sang every single Maiden to have runes for Ice Barrage, and unfortunately Horse forgot to get his bloats out this Maiden, so he lost North 170s. This sets us back a lot for the 50s push, and we actually have to do an extra attack between the 70s and the 50s to proc. On average, that leads to a lot more leak, but during this Maiden we also nuked the crabs with dihns and chins, preventing the slow stack leak. You might start to think that all we need is dihns and chins at this point, and I'd say you're pretty much right. Dihns and chins and specs and just big arms can all sometimes save a Maiden. And yeah, that's kind of what we're playing for, a good Maiden. This Maiden is also a really good example of our 30s freezes killing the remainder of the stack. I always think that's kind of cool to see. We finish her off and get a 112. Perfect. As we come to the other set of Bloat, I always check what his health is at. When it's under 90 at the northwestern corner, that's usually a good sign. That means he's usually almost down to 80% when he stops. This time though, the P-neckers weren't doing a lot of damage, so we need to catch up all that damage when he stops. If you've been looking at my XP drops, they've been insane. I don't want to brag about RNG, but I completely carried this low damage Bloat. Alright, great, we get the 1 down on the 112 Maiden into a 155 Nylo entry. Love to see it. If you look at the chart, so far we're getting exactly what we want. Okay, I'm going to show you the Nylo boss again, and this one isn't the gold boss. We get 2 mage phases, and if you look at our damage output on the melee and range phases, and then compare it to the mage phases, I think it's pretty clear why we don't even bother to bring an occult on the DPS rolls. Double mage phase is usually doomed, but this entry is really good, so we actually have some leeway on our pace. That's pretty much why our thresholds are so tight at Maiden. It's to allow bad bosses later in the raid and still be on pace. We'd rather resign a bunch of Maidens than get to Nylo and need a god boss. We finish him off here on the second mage phase, and it might still be okay due to our waves and entry. 529 into Sot, that's actually in our desired entry range. Okay, it's still a serious run. Let's keep going. Finally, we got the big bad dark beast, Ender of Runs. I don't have as extensive of an analysis on this one. There was just lag or a missed timing, and someone died on the maze. It happens quite a bit actually, because it's a pretty precise method, and there's 5 people who might mess it up. Only one has to make a small mistake, and the run is over. It is what it is, unlucky, go next. We finished the kill, and considering a death, it's only barely outside of our runnable threshold. This would have definitely been a run if we had all survived, but there's always a bunch of ifs in a run, and there's no point thinking about what could have been. Mentality in these runs is a big thing, and as long as you keep looking forward instead of backwards, you're on a way better path. I'm not saying not to do VOD reviews or analyze mistakes, but look at it, learn from them, and if something unfortunate happened, well, just don't worry too much about it. What else is there to do but to go next? I hope that makes sense to a lot of you guys, because this mentality helps even when you're going for GM times or PB or anything like it. I often see people flame at top, and frustration is understandable because you're going for a goal, whatever that may be, and it can sometimes feel that you're being held back by others, which is not a fun thought. But remember guys, we're all playing the game to accomplish a self-imposed goal, and you'd do well to assume the best intentions. That's my rant over though. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a bit of a lackluster one in my opinion, because none of our runs made it past Sot. But that's just how it goes sometimes on the road to wreck. Thresholds are super tight, and we could easily finish these raids for a really good, low 12:30 time, but that's just not what we're going for here. Okay, that's it for today's video, and as always, thanks for watching. Dinsen Chinsen, Dinsen Chinsen, Dinsen Chinsen, Dinsen Chins.